Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Folks are
Hola,
trickling in. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're pleased that this webinar is available in both Spanish and English. You can pick an audio channel at the bottom, English or Spanish. You can select that by clicking the globe on the bottom bar. Please put a message in the chat if you would like some assistance.
bienvenidos. Gracias por acompañarnos esta noche. Nos complace que este seminario web esté disponible en español e inglés. Elija un canal de audio, inglés o español. Puede seleccionar un canal de audio en inglés o en español en la barra inferior con el símbolo del globo terráqueo. Por favor, ponga un mensaje en el chat si desea ayuda.
We'll be starting shortly. As a reminder, go ahead and feel free to rename yourself if you need to. And we'd love to hear where you folks are calling in from. So feel free to let us know who you are in the chat.
They indicted him.
All right, so
The New York Times did it, so you can read it in the Times. It's breaking news.
Thank you. If you're joining us, please make sure you are on mute.
No, not yet.
All right, we will go ahead and get started now. Thank you for joining us at the second webinar in the Social Justice and Equity series. My name is Alex Ambrose. I'm the policy analyst at New Jersey Policy Perspective, and I'm also a former policy assistant at New Jersey LCV, and I'm your guest moderator for tonight's event. As a reminder, please stay muted during the webinar. This webinar will also be recorded and available online later. Once again, this webinar is being translated into Spanish. Thank you to Sofia Rosa from Latino Action Network for translating tonight. There will be time at the end for Q&A, but as we go through the presentation, you're welcome to drop your questions into the chat where our staff will be collecting them. So, March is considered National Criminal Justice Month. We know that some people may be wondering why an environmental organization like New Jersey LCV is hosting a webinar on criminal justice and police reform. So before jumping in, New Jersey LCV wants to give some context to you folks about the tie-in to environmental and environmental justice. First, some of New Jersey LCV's closest partners who represent environmental justice communities have explained, while discussing environmental justice and how it impacts Black and Brown communities is important, white-led organizations must recognize that access to clean water and open space are not necessarily the most pressing issues for many people of color. Black and Brown and low-income communities are more likely to suffer from a number of other pressing matters, like a criminal justice system and a police culture that harms and imprisons Black and Brown people at much higher rates than white people. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it begs the question, how can organizations like New Jersey LCV expect communities of color to give time and energy to chronic issues such as environmental pollution when they are facing many other severe, life-threatening challenges? Second, we believe that the environmental movement has missed opportunities to successfully advance bold and sweeping policy change because we have built too narrow a movement. We viewed environmental issues too narrowly, missing opportunities for collaboration and building more power with partners on intersectional issues like public health, economic justice, and more. And we know that this has prevented us from building large-scale, multiracial, and cross-class movement for change that we need to ensure a just transition of our economy and other systems. Black and brown-led organizations and individuals have known this for years, and environmental advocates are trying to listen and take action. Simply put, the environmental movement cannot be successful without racial, social, and economic justice. Partners in environmental justice and social justice groups have supported the movement, and New Jersey LCB believes it's a priority to reciprocate that support, advocacy, and solidarity. This webinar series begins to uncover pertinent social justice issues in the state while touching on environmental justice and environmental racism. We're excited to learn from tonight's speakers, and we hope you are too. And before diving in, we want to preface this by saying that this is a very emotional topic, and this is especially triggering to those who have encountered or been affected by the police and the judicial system. These conversations are inherently uncomfortable, but it may not be right for everyone. And we want to give everyone the opportunity to take care of themselves before we dive into specific information that may impact some more than others. So, why is the focus of tonight's webinar on criminal justice and police reform? Environmental organizations like New Jersey LCB want everyone to feel safe while enjoying the outdoors. However, not everyone gets to enjoy nature without fear of being targeted by police. In recent years, we've seen several high-profile events involving police violence against Black and brown people. In May 2020, Christian Cooper, a Black man and self-described avid bird watcher, had the police weaponized against him following a confrontation in Central Park over an unleashed dog. In Oakland, California, a white woman called the police on a group of Black people enjoying a day in the park for simply barbecuing. How can people of color have equitable access to nature if they have to fear being targeted by police? Studies have found that Black people are more likely to be stopped by the police, detained pre-trial, charged with more serious crimes, and sentenced more harshly than white people, even when controlling for offense severity. To this day, Black men are drastically overrepresented among the imprisoned population, accounting for 32% of the prison population, but only accounting for 6% of the overall US population. Black men are also 5 times more likely to be incarcerated during their lifetime, and on average, serve longer sentences than white men. Given that environmental hazards are disproportionately placed in and around prisons and Black and Latino communities, the larger prison system structure is a necessary entry point to discussing environmental justice. This has deep historical roots, including political rhetoric in previous decades that focused on tough on crime bills and harsh drug and mandatory minimum sentencing laws that were riddled with racial undertones. And unfortunately, we don't have to look very far to see the impacts of police violence in New Jersey, with the killing of Najee C. Brooks in Patterson, or the impacts of police violence in the environmental movement, with the killing of Manuel Turan in Georgia. Najee and Manuel are 2 recent examples of Black and brown people taking peaceful action, and they are being killed. Because of systemic racism and oppression embedded in our criminal justice and police systems, Black and brown people can't be safe while activating. And in a world that needs everyone's voices and passion for making the world a better place, that is unjust and unfair. Finally, we do want to acknowledge that the topic of police violence, by its nature, might be particularly difficult for folks in the audience tonight who are Black and brown. And now, before I turn it over to our speakers tonight, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this webinar for supporting and uplifting this webinar. In alphabetical order, the co-sponsors that we will thank: ACLU of New Jersey, Atlantic Climate Justice Alliance, CARE NJ, Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, Latino Action Network, NAACP New Jersey Burlington Chapter, New Brunswick Area NAACP Executive Committee, New Jersey Black Empowerment Coalition, New Jersey Highlands Coalition, New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, New Jersey Policy Perspective, Newark Science and Sustainability, Inc., also known as Newark SAS, Social Justice Matters, Trust for Public Lands, and Voters of Tomorrow. A special thank you to Marcus Sibley, President of the Southern Burlington NAACP chapter and Chair of New Jersey Progressive Energy Equity Coalition, and Maria Santiago Valentin, Co-founder, Trustee, Board Secretary, and Director of NJ Affairs of the Atlantic Climate Justice Alliance. Without these partners, this webinar series would not have been possible, so thank you. And now we are excited to introduce our two speakers for this webinar. Our first speaker is Anton Henshaw. Anton is a Rutgers-Camden School of Criminal Justice graduate school student, the CEO and founder of Transformative Justice Initiative, creator of Meet 'em at the Gate, and in partnership with Meet Her at the Gate, with Severe Solutions LLC, a founding member of NJ STEP, the New Jersey Scholarship and Transformative Education in Prison program, which began organizing in Trenton State Prison in 1992. He's a motivational public speaker, entrepreneur, new entry opportunity specialist for Camden County, and one of the lead credible messengers in New Jersey. Mr. Henshaw has dedicated himself to eradicating mass incarceration and transforming legislation to end the structural violence that threatens the public health of our communities. He is an outspoken advocate against police brutality in and outside of the carceral spaces of New Jersey. He is committed to educating the community about the machinations of brutality that permeate the carceral state that is disproportionately directed at Black and Brown carceral citizens. And we also have Marlena Ubel. Marlena is a policy analyst and state policy fellow at New Jersey Policy Perspective and a lovely coworker. Her portfolio includes criminal justice, immigration, and of course, tax and budget. Her primary research interests are criminal legal systems and monetary sanctions. She believes that lived experience is expertise and works closely with those directly harmed by the criminal legal system. Marlena's recent work has been on fees for the right to counsel, and she was able to successfully advocate for the inclusion of a line item to eliminate public defender fees in New Jersey's budget proposal for fiscal year 2024. Marlena earned her undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and her Master of Social Work in Management and Policy at Rutgers University, where she was an Eagleton Fellow in the Assembly Majority Office. Thank you and welcome to our honored speakers. I will now give the floor to our first speaker and someone I'm lucky to call my friend, Marlena.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Alex said, my name is Marlena, and I am an MSW and a policy analyst at New Jersey Policy Perspective. Next slide. So I wanted to start by laying the groundwork about what we do and what I do in this space. So New Jersey Policy Perspective is a research and advocacy organization. We refer to ourselves as a think and do tank. But our primary focus is tax and budget. And that is because we believe that you can tell what someone's values are when you see where they invest their resources. So my research on policing and incarceration also includes police spending and wealth extraction, so fines and fees by the court system. So we can look at how money is taken from these communities and then where they put that money. So how they are spending it on policing and the carceral system. So in that work, I created a report, and that report outlined police spending, but it also framed that in the history and harms of policing. It proposed alternatives to police that are grounded in research and informed by community, because as Alex said, I believe that lived experience is expertise. Next slide. So I'm going to go over some of the research that was in that report. Policing in New Jersey by the numbers. Here are just some quick numbers. So this slide is actually a little bit out of date. The current numbers are, the national average is 2.4 officers for every 1,000 people in the United States. In New Jersey, the average is 4.3 officers for every 1,000 people. So that kind of just goes to show you that when police say they're having trouble recruiting new officers, the number of police has actually been increasing. I'm just pausing for Sophia. The New Jersey also has the 3rd highest base salary in the United States. So the average salary for a police officer is over $91,000 a year as of 2021. And they also have incredible benefits and bonuses. And in 2019, that is the most recent data that is available. We had to Oprah request or do a public records request for this information. Over 51,000 people were arrested for drug violations. 43% of those people were Black. Okay, next slide. So Black New Jerseyans, so quickly, the next few slides are going to be graphics and just things that I learned over the course of my research. So this first one is related to some of the things Alex said in the beginning about the national averages. So we're going to be talking about these big disparities in policing and incarceration, but we're going to be focused on New Jersey. And New Jersey is actually #1 in terms of Black-white disparity and incarceration. So we have the highest disparity in the country. And this first one here is for drug violations. So you'll see that on the right, we have the population of New Jersey. And on the left, we have the arrests. So there are only 15% of New Jersey's population is Black, but almost 43% of the folks that were arrested for drug violations were Black. So that tells you a lot. And I should note that evidence has shown that Black and white Americans use drugs at similar rates. There's no difference. I'm pausing for Sophia. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So here's the incarceration rates for New Jersey. So Black New Jerseyans are incarcerated at disproportionate rates, but not only that, look at our numbers. 61% of our incarcerated population is Black. That should be, I mean, your jaw should hit the floor when you see numbers like these, because it's just astounding, to be honest. And 20% of our incarcerated population is white. Next slide. So we are actually also ranked very high in terms of Black-white disparity and police violence. I think we're in the top 5. So I think we're 4 in the country in terms of Black-white disparity and police violence. So you'll see here that almost half of all New Jerseyans that have been killed by police since 2015 are Black. And I want to note that you'll often hear police in New Jersey say things like, wow, we have really good numbers, you know, we have low rates of violence and fatalities relative to other police forces in the country. And this is true. Relative to other police forces, New Jersey has lower rates of police killing. But when you look at who is getting killed and who is getting harmed by police, as I said, we are in the top 5 for disparity. So Black folks in New Jersey are really, really disproportionately harmed by police officers. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I want to do a quick case study on police spending. So I looked at Elizabeth. I'm going to try to go over this a little bit quickly, not too quickly, hopefully, for Sophia. But so between 2017 and 2021, Elizabeth's police budget increased by $2.5 million each year on average. So keep in mind, this is during the pandemic. Their police, they had allotted $52 million for their police budget, but that does not include, when you look at a budget document, sometimes they hide things. So it did not include things like pension or health benefits or things of that nature. It was just base salaries. So when you take into account all of those things, it actually totaled more than $63 million, accounting for 23% of the general budget. Next slide. And on top of that, there is even more money that gets invested into these departments. So they had $1.75 million on overtime, and they also get grants. So the state funds grants for overtime and other kinds of money that police departments can get for ticketing. They do these ticketing campaigns, and they even compete. It's very wild. So they'll see how many tickets they can write during a ticketing campaign, and the police departments that write the most tickets can get benefits. So they can get overtime dollars for that. That gets funded through the state. And in Elizabeth, they also had, as you see here, $4.4 million during the global pandemic to update their gym, showers, bathrooms, conference room. Next slide. So we should really be asking ourselves, is this a good investment? We know that through tons of research that police don't equal public safety, especially for a lot of communities. Reverend Boyer has said many times of Salvation and Social Justice, he has said, the safest communities are not the communities with the most police. They're the communities that are the most resourced. And those resources include mental health professionals, after school programming. These are the kinds of things that make people safer. So next slide. So I just wanted to put this in context. This is the spending on the Department of Health and Human Services for the city of Elizabeth, and this was their police budget. It's hard to see here, but the Department of Health and Human Services actually got a budget decrease during COVID, while the police department received an increase, a huge increase. And on the right-hand side here, you'll see these are some of the grants that they get at the top right. And then the bottom, if you take all of it together, it was almost $70 million on police that year. Next slide. So, and then this is just a picture, a landscape of New Jersey. So New Jersey had, this is from 2020, New Jersey had more police than counselors and social workers combined. These are like total employed in the state. And this doesn't include correctional officers, or it's just like patrol police officers. And so again, is this a good investment? Next slide. So just some food for thought. Want to leave you with, you know, think about if you have questions for me. What does the data mean to you? What would you change? And I do have some calls to action here around legislation. There is legislation that proposes funding for alternative models to policing. There's police transparency legislation. So yeah, I'll stop there. So, because I already took too much time.
That was great, Marlena. Thank you. And now we are going to transition over to Antone. Antone, all yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to do a brief discussion on the intersection between the criminal legal system and an environmental justice. One of the things that stands out in a lot of this work as a community organizer and as a new entry opportunity specialist is that marginalized communities are disproportionately impacted by both legal system and environmental issues. What do I mean by this? One of the things is that you see the most polluted communities have the correlation between those polluted communities and incarceration rate. You see the health disparity. You see a lot of different things that lead into what we say low income communities of color and indigenous communities. And what you find is that you'll find a lot of bodegas, you'll find a lot of liquor stores, you'll find a lot of lead, you'll find a lot of different things that intersect that never get studied. And these things play major factors into factors in why crime is committed. It doesn't excuse behavior. I want to be clear on that. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but what it does is it explains an environmental ecosystem that is unjust and unbalanced, right? When you don't have access to clean air and clean water and healthy food, you'll find that you'll have a lot of poor decision making, right? You'll have a lot of different dietary things that go into how people grow up, how what they say, comorbidity, how these things intersect into all of our criminal legal system. And one thing that you'll very seldom see is when our men and women from our community go into spaces of incarceration, they're very seldom, if ever, tested. Right? There's no tests to see if lead is a factor, to see if, you know, like I grew up with asthma. I never knew that asthma came from my environment. I suffer from horrible allergies and things like that. These are environmental things. They affect how the brain works, how the body operates, how you make decisions. Those things are never a part of the criminal legal system. Those factors are never even considered. They're not even in any of the mitigating factors for one is sentence. Environmental issues can be criminalized and criminal justice can be used to enforce environmental regulations, what I was just talking about, right? There's no criminalization of living in a food desert. I live in Camden, right? And when you live in a food desert, people don't have access to healthy food choices or healthy, affordable food choices. So you see high levels of shoplifting. all the high-priced foods at bodega, and then the police are called because people are stealing and things like that. They can't afford the foods because they can't get to a nearby supermarket. The nearest supermarket that probably has any healthy food is outside of the city, maybe 10, 12 miles. Cherry Hill, Pennsauken, Deptford, and things like that. And then there's the lack of transportation to get to these things. Much easier. I can't afford it. I'm gonna take it. Police are called. People are arrested for shoplifting or theft and things like that. And it starts this cycle. But what if we invested and created healthy food supermarkets that were affordable inside these inner city enclaves? That is not happening. Environmental degradation can lead to increased crime rates and contributes to the cycle of poverty and marginalization, right? Similarly, the criminal legal system can perpetuate environmental injustice. If you're not aware, Camden is a dumping ground, right? And nothing happens to the polluters, but everything happens to the people who are victims of this pollution. So we had a big mountain of dirt that a company came and delivered inside this old junkyard. And it stayed there for, I want to say like 10, 20 years. And it just blew this toxic dirt. Right now we're housing lead pipes from suburban communities at this company that's sitting there. They're out in the sun, they're drying, and the lead is, when anything that's old that cracks, rain hits it or weather hits it, it's blowing these lead particles all in the air. We also have a waste management incinerating dump that incinerates all the waste, particularly in South Jersey. All the trash trucks come here. And that toxic air is allowed to be disseminated in a particular community. It's the ferry section of our city. And you have high incidence of asthma and respiratory ailments and things like that. But there is no environmental justice. The polluters are not held accountable. But when you see how those environmental atrocities happen that make people sick, when you test them when they go to prison, or if you don't test them, it's more expensive to treat them inside the carceral space than it is to punish and prosecute the environmental offenders. And it's hard to not understand why these companies are not held accountable. There's the intersectional approaches must recognize the complex ways in which the social and environmental factors intersect and create systemic inequalities. So let's say, I think it's called waste management. Waste management can get a tax break when they come into the city, because we're in an empowerment zone here in the city of Camden. Hold Tech, Raisin Tech, Campbell Soup, Subaru, all of those companies can come here and put their headquarters here, right? And do environmental harm, but they're incentivized. They are 100% incentivized in a way to where there is no penalty, there is no regulation. We have a lot of brown sites in our city. No one is doing anything to hold these companies accountable, for the companies that did pollute and have left and since moved on. There is no accountability or trying to make this a healthy environment or clean up all the things that they left behind. And even the ones that are currently here, like, they have the environmental regulations, they're allowed to unleash so much pollution into the air that is acceptable. Acceptable to who? To the people that live in that area? No, that's not what it is. So what we've been able to begin to discuss, which is why the intersectionality of criminal justice and environmental justice is so important, right? We have to. we must come up with a public health strategy that leads to a harm reduction, that heals our communities and our environment collectively. This is a symbiotic relationship that should have been formed a long time ago. And we would be able to do a lot more, right? We need to be in it, not just when there's an environmental waste, but when we're looking at disproportionate what before me was just presenting, the highest racial disparity in the country, right? So we'll talk about our water, we'll talk about the lead, we'll talk about our air, we'll talk about the waste of energy and all the other stuff, but we don't talk about the wasting and throwing away of people. That is very, very important. We have no people that we can throw away. And the relationship with environmental justice, as once I began to study, I'm a graduate student at Rutgers Camden, pursuing my master's in criminal justice, began to see how these things intersect and how very important that we're supposed to be in the courtrooms on both sides of this issue. We're supposed to be in the legislature on both sides of this issue, because what we're watching, right, is the mass expenditure of funds towards the back end of a problem instead of the front end. And they go hand in hand. We have to get out in front, right? We have to repurpose all of this money that's going towards law enforcement and environmental subsidies and all of these things that are harming us in so many different ways. Say, nah, we can't do this. We can't back in funding. We need the front end funding for a better environment and to help people not ever enter the criminal justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Antone. And now we are going to start our discussion. Let's see. So please feel free to continue to put your questions in the chat. And we're going to start with this question. So both Antone and Marlena, you both talked a little bit about resources and funding. What are some, we'll start with Marlena. What are some of the alternatives to policing? So where else can we be putting these resources that would be better suited to addressing these issues? So Marlena, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. And Antone talked about this too, but so there's actually been research on this since as early as the 70s, right? Evidence-based, peer-reviewed research about different ways to promote safety. I'm sorry, the bouncing around the screen is throwing me off. But what they found is things like open spaces, like the things that Antone was talking about, communities that are you know, well resourced in terms of like parks and places for people to be and feel safe, actually just have lower rates of crime in general. Because when you have strong community relationships and people are proud to be in the spaces that they're in, something called informal social control networks form. So neighbors just keep an eye on each other, and it actually reduces naturally incidents of violence and crime. And then you also have health. When the Obamacare happened and we had expansion of Medicaid, crime rates dropped dramatically because people had access to health care. And then the more direct alternatives are things like many of you may be familiar with Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon. This is a crisis response team made up of mental health professionals, only unarmed, right? Why do we have to send people with guns to situations that could potentially cause escalation, right? Triggering when you see somebody with a weapon. So unarmed mental health professionals on the scene. There's also a program called STAR in Denver. This is again, unarmed mental health professionals arriving during a crisis. And what they found from these programs were not only do they save money because they're less expensive, police and police equipment are very, very expensive. And I want to also just note that I'm not saying that having lots of benefits and high salaries is a bad thing. It's a good thing. But least salaries, the most benefits. Why do we value them more than, it feels like we value them more than every other helping profession. So anyway, they found that these teams not only are less expensive, but they actually are very, very successful. They connect people to resources they need, lower recidivism rates, all of that, all the measures of success. That's it.
Thank you. And we'll just pause for a second for Sophia to catch up. And in the meantime, Antone, why don't you talk a little bit about that, some alternatives as well?
I agree with Marlena's position. Well, I would always say, in case anybody doesn't know, I'm also justice impacted. And I meant, I didn't intentionally leave that out. I served 100% of a 30-year to life sentence. And I was paroled. I left in 1988 and I came home in 2015. And one of the things that I watched was the correlation between the investment in our public safety infrastructure and the disinvestment into our public health infrastructure. When you talk about what Marlena was talking about, right, I can go 10 minutes to Cherry Hill and I can see a big investment in the public health infrastructure. They have parks, they have places they can go, they can socialize. But then when you watch and you come into Camden, it's not like that, right? They just made an open air park in Kramer Hill section of the city, but it's built over a dump that used to be a dump. It was a dump my entire life. And to come back home and to see that it's open and water space and how they were able to revitalize that area, it's wonderful. But for so long, we haven't invested in the spaces where marginalized communities live. And it's in that disinvestment that we'll also find high incarceration rates, high comorbidity. You'll find people sick. You'll find all of these things. But what you'll also find is a high police presence. And that police presence, right, and the money that they'll spend, right? I asked last year, let's be clear, it costs $608,000 a year to incarcerate one youth. One youth in this state. And that's after they do something wrong. So the response for me was, I sponsored a football team that just started. And when we sponsored the team, there was a bunch of young men and a few young women that couldn't play for free. So I came out and I asked for $10,000 so these young people could play football for free. They said, we don't have money. We don't have any money. There's nothing we can do. So I calculated the 250 students that we had, and it came out to about $90 million we were saving the state from incarceration because these young people were playing football and they weren't getting in trouble. I said, you mean to tell me we could help save 90 million and we can't get 10,000 to save 90 million? And it was about investing in our young people and investing in our communities. And we have to look at the numbers and use those analogies to be able to say, if you could invest 10,000 to save 90 million, we could repurpose that. We could use them in other areas. And this is where, that's how I would say, a lot of this budget, a lot of these budget items and a lot of things that they're doing, you would have to find sound repurposing items in the communities that they need, as opposed to waiting for something bad to happen. Because whether nothing happened, the money is in the budget, right? It's there, right? It's never going to leave that budget. Every year that money is there. But when people don't fulfill those spaces, what do they do with that money? It should go back to the communities and reinvest in the public health infrastructure. I've never seen a community that was healthy and unsafe. I've always seen communities that were unsafe and unhealthy.
Thank you both for that. All right, next, we have a question for Antone. So Antone, in your story, you talk about your experience with the criminal justice system. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it influences your work today?
Most of the prisons that I was forced to survive in, they were built on wasteland, right? No one ever came in to check the pipe. They just had a recent last year, they had Legionnaire's disease in Rahway State Prison, and they couldn't figure out where the Legionnaires came from. And if you know anything about Legionnaires, it's water source and things like that. And what wound up happening was they went in, public health finally came into the prison. They checked all the water, they checked the toilets, nothing. And then we found out, somebody said, did you check the Cambros? What was the connection was, the people that were diagnosed and that got sick all had one thing in common. They were on control meds and they would go to a particular area in the prison, drink water from a Cambro that was never cleaned in years. And they almost died. So it was in those spaces and started looking at how our medical, how we were treated, how we were being abused. If any of you guys know about what was happening in the mayhem, this went on for years. The rape, murder, and beating and torture of women for years under multiple administrations, and nothing happened. And it shaped me in a way to where even when I left the carceral space didn't leave me. Right. And what I had to survive and what I had to endure, I said, I will spend the rest of my life not trying to reform it, but to transform it and do as much abolition work as I possibly can, raise awareness about what's actually happening, we're paying for. They're doing it in our name. They're using our taxes to cause public health destruction to the citizens that are in these carceral spaces to come back out to our community and then say, oh, come back out here and fix your life, when you spend 20, 30 years damaging people and then come back out and fix it.
Thank you for sharing that, Antone. And now we're going to move to a question from the chat. So there was a question about how this can also fit into our schooling system. So first, I want to say that New Jersey is the first state that is including climate change in our K-12 curriculum. So that is something to celebrate. However, it seems like we can go further to talk about environmental justice and the connection between the environmental justice and criminal justice. So why don't we start with Marlena? Can you talk a little bit about how education can affect criminal justice? And then we'll jump to Antone to hear from him as well.
Yeah, this is like a many parts thing here because New Jersey has some of the best public schools in the country, but we are also one of the most segregated states in the country. So we have students that, depending on your ethnicity, color of your skin, your socioeconomic status, might be getting a really different experience in the public school. And the reason that's relevant is because when we implement all these changes for our school systems and we talk about how we're going to teach students about the environment, environmental justice, the history of these systems, the students that are more likely to receive that information up front are students in more well-resourced school districts. This is a problem because the students that are being most impacted might be the last ones to get the information that they can then use to advocate for the changes in their communities. And I think it's just important to point that out, because the students to whom this is most valuable, learning about the environmental justice and the impact, the intersections of carceral systems and state control and the environment in which they live, the students to whom that would be most valuable are maybe at the least likely to get that information. But yeah, I guess I'll just stop there.
Anton, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, that's a central part, you know, an essential part of is not just teaching the mind, right? But teaching about teaching to the whole person, how you interact with your environment and how your environment interacts with you, right? How do you create a holistic ecosystem if you're never taught, right? How you connect to the earth and recharge your electrons in your body by taking your shoes off and walking on the grass, right? So we have all of these barriers that prevents us from learning about these things, and then we wonder why we're sick, right? Something as simple as taking off my shoes and walking in the grass in my socks and letting my feet touch the earth and that electromagnetic field to realign myself. They're not going to teach me that sitting in a public school, right? But the fact that we're about to start doing this is about to be a part of the curriculum, goes a long way, right? About our food system, right? What to eat, what not to eat, right? What's healthy and what's not so healthy, right? That even if you like cookies, there's a certain way to enjoy cookies, right? How to do it healthy, and how to use that in a way where we're teaching people to not only be responsible as custodians of the environment, but themselves as a part of that environment has to be a part of that teaching. And saying, yeah, when you look at that and what's coming out of that incinerator in the Fairview section of the city, right, that is harming us. That's the stuff we want to stop. When we're looking at the lead pipes, we want to be able to say, right, that's what we don't want. Healthy water. What does that look like? How to reverse osmosis of the water and things like that, how to protect ourselves, right? Because the people that are profiting off the current structure don't care. As long as their bottom line is not affected, they don't care. Education goes a long way, especially when we get them younger, right? I just had vegan pizza, right? I didn't know what it was. They gave it to me. The only part I was like, something's different about it. And it was the cheese. But the kids loved it. And it was how it was introduced. Try this. Let's learn this. Let's learn a way that we can eat pizza. There's also a healthy way to eat. And I think that education, how that education is implemented, how it's invested in our young people will go a long way to strengthening us as a movement, as a collective movement, to address some of these atrocities that are happening. But it's going to really be in our baby, our younger generation.
Very, very good points, Anton. I like that. And now I want pizza. All right. We have by the way, a great discussion going on in the chat. So please feel free to keep the discussion going. And a great shout out to League of Women Voters, who is registering people who have been released from incarceration. We have time for just a few more questions. This one is from the chat. So Marlena, can you talk about the effect that police unions have on criminal justice and transformative justice?
Yeah. Oh, we didn't even get to restorative and transformative justice, I feel like, but and what that really means. But
And if you want to define those as well.
so yeah, so I'll just really quickly, we do not have, our systems are not restorative or transformative justice systems, the systems of the state. A restorative justice, the philosophy there is, rather than a punitive approach, what you do is it's a community approach. It's there's accountability for the harm, and then there's but you're reintegrated into the community. So it's not what we do is we kind of just expel people away, like Antone said, we hide people. And Angela Davis said this, like, prisons don't disappear social problems, they disappear human beings. The social problems remain. So the idea behind restorative and transformative justice is to address the social problem, and restore the community and heal the community. But anyway, police unions. So yes, in New Jersey especially, police unions are very powerful. We have really, really powerful police unions in this state. And unfortunately, they're often motivated by, work and profits for their members. I mean, a lot of unions are, right? But so how do police get work and make money? You need people to be criminals to make money. It's a terrible way to think about this. I mean, it's racial capitalism, and so the police unions will often advocate for, more punitive policies and bills that will create, will criminalize more people. So yes, that's the reality of it.
I would add, there's no nice way to say this, but we're witnessing the modern version of reinstitution. And we have to look at how our policing, the history of policing, where it comes from, how we got to this point. And their power is like, everybody, what we were talking about Najee Seabrook. I know him. I know him. I don't feel like he's gone because he's a part of me. I work with him. I loved his smile. I loved his work. And what's so hard is when you watched how they handled it, right? He called for help. He asked for help. And he wanted someone to come do this. But when you watch how powerful these organizations are, right? He needed somebody from mental health, not from police, right? He needed to be, and he asked for that help. And they sent the police and he died. He was killed for it. But watch what happened and how the system worked, right? They wrote the policy, the unions, right? And I was talking to some officers in one of my counterterrorism classes. Oh, we don't write legislation. You don't. Technically you don't, but you influence, right? You definitely influenced it. You created that when the body cameras came as a part of the George Floyd and everything that happened, that you would not release the body camera footage as a union for 20 days. You would be able to write your reports and do all the things that you needed to do, right? And you established this. You went before the legislation and legislators and you testified to them about this. And you did a lot of things. And when you watch how they do, corrections officers, right? They're now considered police officers. They're part of the union that are statewide in our state. Do that because they were losing numbers. And when you look at how many prisons we have in our state, when you add those correctional officers to that number, you balloon not just that, but their influence and their monetary contributions in the elected officials in our state. So it's that partnership, that marriage between policing and criminal legal systems, right? And we have to organize around it. Malcolm X says, we're not outnumbered, we're out-organized. And we have to organize around breaking that bond. They work for us, but yet they're setting policy that when something goes wrong, they control the narrative and how it's seen and how it's believed. And now all of a sudden, the Attorney General's office did what? They took over the Patterson Police Department after that community has complained decades upon decades about the corruption there. Why did it take my brother, DC Brooks, to die before the Attorney General's office under any administration act?
And Anton, I think that leads very perfectly into the last question that I would like to ask both of you as we approach the top of the hour. What is one thing, something both of you would like to leave this audience with, either an action they can take, a thought, or something else? So Marlena, we'll start with you.
I want to say that I do this work because I believe a better world is possible. When we have these conversations, sometimes it feels, it's overwhelming. And you're like, you know, it's all so bad, it's all so broken. And I just want to say that I believe that we can fix it. And we are in this work because we truly deeply believe that. And so just join the fight, help us fix it, get involved, follow organizations like ours, like Newark Community Street Team, the ACLU, New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, Salvation Social Justice. Email me if you want more. Yeah.
I would say right now, last year we got it all the way. A lot of this is centered on the bedrock of slavery being allowed in our state constitution. And there's a movement right now to end slavery in our state. So, you know, some people disagree with me on this point, but I'm gonna just say it the way I know it. You can't get reparations for something that's not over. And my action step would be, there's an assembly bill, I think it's ACR 125 and ACR 135, in slavery in our state. Right, that is the bedrock to which our mass incarceration and the throwing away of human beings from our environment centered on right now. And a lot of organizations last year, when we got into the ballot, didn't step up and didn't. I think this is a big thing where we can intersect a major pull and push our legislators, allow this to be put on the ballot this November, and let the voters, the citizens of the state of New Jersey, decide to end this scourge of slavery in our state. And that, to me, will be the first step where a lot of this stuff could start to be dismantled. Right? When you allow for people to be propertized in these spaces, they don't care. When it's no longer fundable, now we'll have the funds to take care of the things that we need to repurpose those funds in the communities, in these open spaces, and build that green energy infrastructure that we all deserve.
Thank you. And thank you both for all of your insight and your advocacy and your continuing work in criminal justice and police reform in New Jersey. We are out of time for now, but I think we all know that we can continue this conversation. Please follow our wonderful speakers. Their accounts are on the slide here. You can also reach out to them. Once again, this was the second webinar in the Social Justice and Equity series. Stay tuned for more information about the next webinar in April on healthcare for communities of color. Thank you again to all of the co-sponsors that helped us out tonight. Thank you again to our speakers, and a special thanks to Sophia Rosa from Latino Action Network for translating this evening. Thank you all and enjoy your evening, everyone.